You know what time it is. 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 Hey guys, and welcome to Little Black Book. You know what time it is. Talking to you guys about, I guess I want to talk to you guys about relationships, talk to you guys about healing, especially within the Black community. I think the last few weeks has been quite challenging. Challenging because there's been so many different things that I've seen on the internet, so many different conversations I've been a part of. And even on our own channel, seeing many different topics being spoken about, all from different perspective and all walks of life. And it got me thinking because the last time I was on here doing a live, I said I wanted to pray and just pray for the healing of people. But it really did get me thinking about some of the things that are going through at the moment. And I'm hearing so many different conversations and different corridors and different rooms. And the one thing I keep hearing consistently is pain. I keep hearing the same thing over and over again, pain. And I was just sitting here in my room and I was just in my living room and I was thinking, do you know what we have a job to do? I have a job to do, right? And that job is to provide a safe space to have great conversations so we can actually begin healing processes. And so I was thinking, how best do I go about that then? I was just talking with the Lord and just like kind of just quickly saying to him, listen, big man, listen, I don't know what you sent me down here for, but man needs to do something. And so I wanted to have a real conversation today about Black men and Black women need healing because we're responding in pain. I go onto one side of the YouTube sphere, I get men talking about 3 or 4s and women are bad and women are this. I go to the other side of YouTube, I'm hearing women say, we don't want men no more, we divesting, we having kids by ourselves. There's a whole lot of rhetoric on both sides from both men and both women that is from especially the Black community that is just killing us at this moment, right? And because we're in this new generation where information is at the touch of a button, it's problematic. Number two, we're in a generation where you speak and your phone hears exactly what you said, and then it provides information based upon what you said. So it confirms the bias that you have. So if you're speaking negative things, guess what? Your phone picks up the negativity and brings it into your alignment on the internet through adverts, through YouTube videos, through articles, through YouTube, Yahoo and Google searches. Like you have to really deep. When the Bible says there's life and death in the tongue, it weren't joking because it really does put you in a particular place, right? But we want to have relationships, both men and women. And someone said it in the chat very nicely, Precious, which is communicating effectively to get an effective result at the end. Do we want to just complain and moan and cry about about the situation, or do we actually want to put some actions in place? Are we going to take accountability, or are we going to keep on using excuses? Are we going to keep on reacting in pain, or are we going to actually heal from the situation we're in at the moment? And it made me think because I was watching Fresh Prince, and this is actually embedded in this point. So I was going to play this little clip. We're going to get the conversation flowing and started, and we're going to go deep today, right?
Safe space for just us. And the work you all do to uplift each other and the community is great, but look, honestly, you all do a lot of complaining, but no one even bothers to show up for the student town halls.
Now, why do I like that clip? Is because he starts talking about the fact that there's a lot of talking, complaining, putting blame on either party, but then you're not doing the work, right? So there's a lot of people on YouTube sphere who do a lot of complaining on one side or complaining about this side. Women are this, men are that, women are this, women are that, Black women this, well, Black men are that. But then the actual solutions that are often put in are fear-based and often about avoiding and dismissing the actual issue. And I get it, because oftentimes when you're in fear, when you're hurt, when you're in survival mode, it can be easy to lay the finger and the blame automatically on the other party just to be able to feel better about yourselves. But it doesn't actually solve the issue that you have at hand. And I believe that we're called to solve problems, both men and women. But for me personally, I like to talk to the women and I like to talk to the men, but specifically the men, right? Just because of the fact that we have such a huge influence and impact on our community, and we have the ability to bring changes
wholesomely when we're actually tuned in, tapped in to the community, the environment, and we're tapped into some of the problems that we're facing and actually start to bring solutions to the table. So let's talk about it, right? Black men and black women need healing because a lot of us are responding in pain. Now, before I start, I just feel like, what, I want to set the tone, I want to set the mood correctly. So I might just pray quickly and then we'll go into I'm going to pray quickly. And then we're gonna just get into some conversation and get deep as well. All right. So we'll just play some music and then just a little bit of a prayer in there as well. Let your name. Father, we thank you in the name of Jesus, oh God. Before we start this conversation, Lord, I'm just praying that, we speak words that are needed to bring healing to your children and are needed to bring safety, compassion, love, appreciation, validation to your children as well, Lord. I just pray that, Lord, this is a time and a season that, I think we as black men and black women are more in need of the very thing that you actually are, which is love. The Bible says that God is love. That's what we actually need in this time and this season. So I'm praying that, Lord, as your Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, talks about what love is, I pray we encapsulate those qualities. Lord, in Jesus' name we pray. You are the Lord. Let your name be glorified. Yes, yes, Lord. You are the Lord. Let your name be glorified. Pray that, Lord, as we start this conversation, Lord, that you give me the words of wisdom to speak, not just knowledge, not just understanding, but wisdom. So, Father, I pray that, Lord, as we start this conversation, that your revelation and the understanding that opens people's eyes, oh God, will be able to be reached in these moments, oh God. So as we start this conversation, Father, it's not just for us, but Lord, that you take this message further. The Bible says your word goes forth and does not come out void. And so, Father, as we open up the sphere of the spiritual realm, we're just saying that, Lord, let the true words that you speak, the true words that encapsulate your character, that encapsulate what you are, Lord, let it come through in this conversation. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's get into this conversation. Let your name be glorified. All right, cool. So let's get into this conversation because we can't mess around. All right, cool. So the first thing I want to talk about is healing, right? Because I think this is where I'm getting a lot of stuff coming from. We have too much noise, too much people operating out of pain, too many voices in pain, too much destruction going on in our community as a whole when it comes to relationships. We have too much of that stuff happening, and it's causing a lot of problems within our community. Because when people get on the mic and are speaking from their pain, and speaking from their experiences that are wrapped in pain, and offer it as a proffer or a proof that this is how somebody is, oftentimes it's incorrect because it's miscalculated, because the person who's speaking is speaking from a false perspective. No, not say false. They're speaking from a true perspective according to them, but it's not a healed perspective. And sometimes when we speak from these perspectives of brokenness, we offer out broken solutions and broken additives, and broken ideas, right? Which further enhance the brokenness in the community. And the reason why I want to start this conversation with faith and speak it with Jesus Christ is because whenever we talk about relationships, the highest ordeal or the highest level we can ever reach is what God gave us, which is agape love. And it's the highest example of love. In fact, it is what separates the example of love is what separates Christ from every other God or religion out there. This is not a sermon, but I do have to bring this into alignment so you understand where we're coming from. In order to give people the anecdote and in order to administer healing, we have to understand where the original blueprint is in order to be able to judge where we are in the scale of the healing. Now, of course, nobody is saying that we're going to be perfect, but what we are speaking from is understanding that love quintessentially is the main goal we're trying to reach, whether that's in relationship with friends, family, or even romantic ones. And we are in a season, or at least we're as a community, Black people, in a season, especially on this online tribe that we have so much, conversations with, we're in that season where we can see there's a lot of people saying a lot of things that don't line up, that don't add up. People are talking about stuff and their life doesn't match up to that. And what I mean by that is lying to people, like telling people, I do this, and I'm talking about the manosphere specifically. Then I'm talking about the divestment group too, saying things that you don't actually match up with, right? And then trying to administer that to people because you're in pain, because you're angry, because you're frustrated, because you're hurt, because you're annoyed, because you're jealous, because you're envious, and because of the wounds that you're carrying, you administer false antidotes to people. And those people taking the serum take it further than you could ever take it. It's a message. And it's the very same principle that Christ used. When Christ was preaching, it's not Christ who preached to the millions. He sent the message to 12. 12 sent the message outwardly. They sent it outwardly again. They sent it outwardly again. So administering the wrong anecdote is problematic because it's not you, the individual, who normally sends the message to the mass. You send it to a few who get it and they run with it when they believe it. And so I'm seeing a lot of these kind of messaging on our internet. I'm seeing the men and the women come into madness. Okay. So I want to talk about this deep healing. I want to talk about definition of healing. One definition of healing in one aspect is a deep healing refers to the process of creating this balance on all levels of internal system, and in addition, finding balance in relationship to the outside world. It's a very flimsy definition of what healing is. A reality is that I think we all understand the concept of healing. It's a bit like time and describing what time is. You know what I mean? But when we get healed, we understand that our bodies become lighter, our minds become sharper, our spirits are lifted. And when we undergo healing, we see the world in a different way. In fact, we interact with it in a different way. Right? We see situations in a different way. And as a Christian specifically, we see the world in a particular way, and it actually influences the way that we interact with it. Again, we're not perfect, so we're not always going to adhere or administer the right kind of way. But the healing corrects the broken retina and broken vision that we have when it comes to the world. And it's so interesting because a lot of conversations between men and women, or even between men and women, focuses on the pain of the situation rather than the gain of the situation. And what I mean by the gain is a gained perspective, one where we hold ourselves accountable. We look back and review and say, is there things that could be changed? Is there things that don't need to be changed? Are there things that needed to be improved? Am I seeing things correctly? Am I having the right conversations? Because there are so many different things going on and components that are moving when it comes to relationships. People get into a relationship, someone cheats on you, and automatically now women are all women are 304s, or they're all hoes according to some people. Or a man cheats on you and suddenly all men are cheaters, all men are bad, none of them want to, you know what I mean? And then it becomes about the pain that you're feeling rather than gaining a perspective of healing. See, the Bible says that Christ came not for those who are healed, but for those who are sick. What does that mean? It means that those who are sick need love. That doesn't always mean that you have to administer that, but what it does mean is that you need to be in a space where you are healed, so that when you walk, talk, and breathe and move, you move in that love. And this oftentimes gives you a different perspective on how other people are moving. It is not that Christ didn't know that people will try to take advantage of him or try to kill him, but the reality was that because he was operating in so much love and so much understanding, so much compassion, that actually those who were wolves didn't have the opportunity because he was moving with wisdom. So it's not just moving in love and I'm just here gandifying myself. And no, it's understanding also there is wisdom at points. There's wisdom that's needed in order to operate in this love. There's a game we call in dating because we're dealing with human beings, right? And the game is understanding how women are, understanding how men are, understanding what women want, understanding what men want, understanding what women don't like, understanding what men like. And of course, in between that, there are differences between the two that are largely similar or largely different. And then it comes down to an individual basis. Some women like what men like, some men like what women like. There are different types of men and women, and there are different complexities to that. So that's where wisdom comes in. Bible says if you lack wisdom, ask for wisdom. Right? Ask for wisdom. I think wisdom is the principal thing I think in a society that we need today, because it gives you the ability to decipher, discern, and dissect the information you're coming your way. There's a key word I'm hearing, I think we should be talking about in the society at the moment, and it's simply information overload. Because we've got too much information at this moment. We've got information overload. All right. Now the Bible says, obviously, when it comes to these times, we'll have knowledge will abound in a sense, right? But we've got information overload, and what that means is when we get information overload, we're in a society when you're overloaded with information, you look for some way you can get bite-sized information, right? We look for places to go and get some to get information from, right? To go and get quote unquote wisdom. And so because we have so much portals of information, people get sensory overload and they look for the smaller bite they can take that they can digest and understand. The problem is not the digestion of the little information. The problem is that when we go to these other portals to go and receive the small bite size, the bite size they're giving us is infected. And when it's infected, what happens is that you start to see the world in the way they've preached it, or the way they've taught it, or the way they've understood it. And in that broken perspective, what happens then, people then take on those narratives as their faith, as their faith, right? And they begin to walk in it in the relationship. I'm still talking about relationships and I'm still talking about natural things, but we understand this from a spiritual principle, meaning what faith cometh by hearing the word of God. Whenever you hear something, right, it becomes part of your faith. If you allow it to, if you let it sink in, it becomes part of your belief system. And whatever becomes part of your belief system, your opinions, judgments, and experiences becomes part of your belief. What happens is you've been to walk in it. And then when you begin to walk in it, you begin to see it. And when you begin to see it, you begin to interact with it. And it becomes your reality. And a lot of times we got information overload in a system that when we didn't have internet, when we weren't all interconnected, you'd only have the experiences of your community. You wouldn't have the luxury of hearing about somebody's story in Los Angeles, or somebody's story in Africa, or somebody's story in England, right? And oftentimes, bad news spread fast. But guess what? When you're on the internet, bad news spread quickly. It spreads like Usain Bolt. It spreads so much quicker. Negativity sells. So in this environment, what we've got now is a lot of people connecting their experiences, and they have real experiences. People are hurt. People have been hurt, and this is real. And they connect it with the information overload of that negativity, and it confirms more of the bias. This is exactly what it is. Men are trash. This is exactly what it is. All women want you for is for your bank account. That's all it is. Women don't even love men. No, only women are loved unconditionally. You know, like, and so what happens is you start hearing rhetorics. Now, of course, if you're wise and you have a thinking cap about yourself, you start to critically analyze the information coming your way. What you'll realize is a lot of people in this world are not critical thinkers, and they're not people who think by themselves. They are waiting for bite-sized information to come their way so that it can confirm their bias, rather than researching, going deeper, analyzing, and seeing, is this the reality of the truth? Rather than being a Berean of the world that they're listening information to, they end up being somebody who is liable to end up in a cult. What that means is, in the Bible, what we had in the Bible was Paul began preaching, and the Bereans said, "We love this, Paul, but you know what? We got to check it, because you could talk a good game, but I need to go and check this in the Word of God." Now, what does that mean? It meant they went to do research, double checked it themselves, made sure, okay, wait, what you're saying right now, I hear you. And you want, you're telling the truth, because when I look at it, I can see the evidence of, right? I can see the evidence of. Now, unfortunately, what we have in society is that a lot of people aren't critical thinkers. They're looking for bite-sized information to make a quick decision, because information overload, what happens is when there's too many criteria, the person becomes they become paralysis by analysis. And what happens is they can't make a movement, they can't make a decision. So what they do is, in order to make a decision, I go somewhere else to retrieve a smaller amount to make a decision. And so what we have in our society right now, I'm going to talk specifically about the internet age of YouTube and all those kind of conversations, is people taking bite-sized pieces and making it into something that is palatable for people, all right? And people take on that palatability, okay? And then they take on their rhetoric, and then they end up becoming like their cult leader, right? They end up becoming like their cult leader. And so because now information is being passed and it's not being challenged, it becomes your rhetoric. And then that's why you hear on both men and women's sides certain points that keep reiterating over again, exactly like somebody else said it, because they're without their own particular experience or without their own particular understanding of the topic. So they repeat it exactly like somebody else said it. This is both on men and women's sides, right? This is both on men and women's sides. Black women and black men do this consistently. They bring out points that's exactly like someone else said, without there being a nuance to the conversation, right? And when there's no nuance added to the conversation, no understanding added to the conversation, what happens is then people end up saying things are black and white, but they're not black and white. And if the things are not black and white, what we require from people in this moment then is to look a bit deeper, right? To look a bit deeper. And so, oh, sorry about that. And so information overload is a problem because it starts the problem of people not really understanding what's coming their way, not trying, because you have information overload, people struggle to comprehend, but then they don't want to comprehend because it's too much. It means learning something new, and it's very difficult. You ever tried to learn something new? Like, for instance, for me, it's learning new languages. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's difficult for me, right? So what I might do is might go on TikTok, just 3 words I need to learn about the language. Hello, bye, and you look beautiful. What are those 3 words, right? And I might go somewhere else where it gives me a bite-sized version of the language, but I actually don't get an understanding. All I'm getting is the information and oh, this is how you say hello, this is how you say bye, this is how you say you look beautiful in that language. But actually, you don't understand the construct of that language. You don't know how it's formulated, you don't know the rules, you don't know why certain words are put together. You just want the answer at the end so you can make a decision. We all have our ways of doing it, so that's, all right. So, um, for a lot of people, when it comes to relationships, we're getting a lot of information from the internet, and a lot of these informations are not about connect. Have you noticed a lot of this stuff is not about maintaining a relationship? A lot of the information is about actually ending it, beginning it, so attaining or breaking it, rather than the maintenance of it. Like, how do we actually talk so we can actually maintain it? What are the things we need to learn how to do better to maintain our relationship, to keep it going, to keep the fire going, to repair certain things that are broken, or to make sure we don't fall into certain things. But a lot of the conversation ends up being about the beginning and the end, not the middle. But the middle is actually the most important part of the whole situation. It's what holds it all together. The beginning and the end are good. We need those conversations. We actually do. But the end part is what's not happening. The middle part's not what's happening. So now what happens is we have hurt people on either side, men and women, struggling in relationships because we don't give them information, and including myself, we need to give them more information about how to make that relationship a healthier one. How to make that relationship a healthier one. Of course, don't start with a toxic one in the first place, but I'm saying, how do we make it healthy? How do we maintain? Because it's the lack of how is what creates hopelessness in people. The lack of how to do something is often what creates hopelessness in people. When people don't know how to do something, that's what creates the hopelessness. you know? So it's tough out here. Okay, cool. Let me put that point to bed. Um, and get to the next point. Okay, so um, I want to talk about this because I think this is some of the stuff that's come up in recent weeks and stuff and conversations and me going on YouTube, and I wanted to put this here. So both for men and women, there is a dating game in the dating. There's a game in the dating field, right? There's a game that is played by both men and women in the dating field. Okay, um, so the game is simply this, right? On a very basic biological level, right? Women want love, men want love. Women want it in men loving them and showing affection. Men want it in women respecting them. That's a simple foundation. The beginning part of it when it comes to men and women and interacting in relationships. This is what we want. How that looks like slightly different. So women, for instance, we might say women want protection. They want to feel protected emotionally, mentally, spiritually, sexually, financially. They want you to provide in some sense as well, right? Emotionally, financially, sexually, etc. The particular fields I always talk about. And then they want a man that speaks life into them, right? For us as Christians, it will be a man that prays and has his mind on God, right? He's submitting himself to the Lord so that she also trusts that there is something greater than him. For someone who doesn't have God, principle has to be the highest order. Simple fact. And the principle oftentimes is love. It's still God. They just don't have a relationship with God. And that it's still God. Because the highest order of principle is love. And love being that for us as Christians, love is God. And what people do is they take his principles and make it into their own, as if it's their own, but it's not. It comes from somewhere, right? And that highest order is what men should submit to in order for women to know that this is the curriculum you're following. This is the standard you're following, meaning I can follow you because I know that you have something that keeps you in check. And that keeps you in check is how you're supposed to behave. What keeps you in check is knowing that there's a standard, there's a level, there's a bar that you know that this is the set of behaviors that you should behave like so that I don't be abused in a relationship. The dating game, the game in the dating field is about understanding these schematics and understanding these particular things. If we don't understand these things, that's where people start to lose out. Okay. But we'll get into that in a second or two. But yes, so the highest order for anyone to follow is principle. The principle of what? Love. That's the highest order. That should be everybody's God, whether it's your idol or whether you don't follow Jesus or not. Your highest order has to be love, right? If we're talking about relationships. And for us as Christians, if a man is to take the role of being the head, which actually is meaning be the source. So whenever we talk from a Christian perspective, when we say a man is a head of the woman, what it actually is that he's not, the head does not mean domination. What it means to be is the source. And what the source means is to give. It is to be the source. So you're meant to give so she can receive in the same fashion. But you're also in a position of receiving because the Bible calls us the bride of Christ. So if I put that in this perspective, what that means is even as men, we're women. Hear me out before you take this part out and you don't hear what I'm saying. Even as men, we are like women. Okay? We are like women. It's when I learned this principle, I was like, wow, like God just be trying to shake me up a little bit too much. You know what I mean? He want to take me out. But the reality is, men are women. This is why we call them women, because they're taken out of a man. But men are women. What does that mean? It means that the same way we complain about women and how they move is actually the way that you move when you talk to God. And this is when I started realizing, whoa, before I start talking about these women, I better check me, because do I do that to God? I think I do. Am I out of order at times? I think I am. Am I blatantly disrespectful at times? I think I can be. Can I not listen to God at times? I think I am. Hmm. Am I unloving to God at times? I am. Do I fail to spend time with God at times? I do. Do I complain too much? I do. Hmm. Do I get emotional about situations when it's not going the way I want it to go? And then say I trust him, but then go behind his back? I think I do. Am I unwilling to submit at times? I think I am. Right? When you start realizing, and when you start realizing that, you start to have more compassion for the other party. You start realizing, right? Oh, don't worry, Amanda. I know you're saying you're gonna, you're only talking about the women. The women, I'll get the women later. Don't worry about that. So, I got y'all. We're gonna have a balanced conversation, right? But that's when we start to realize, because at the end of the day, you as a man too have to also be realizing that when you put your relationship between you and God, you will start to realize that the very thing you're asking your wife, you better be ready to now do yourself. And it's scary to put it that way, because then that means I can't just blindly do whatever I want. But the reality is you can't just blindly do what you want. Leadership has to be from a place of love. That's where we have our high, and that's what I'm saying about the highest order. A man that truly loves the Lord has to see things from his perspective, because you the bride, you the woman. So if I ask you to follow me, right? If I ask you to follow me in leadership, I'm saying I'm leading the home, follow me. I also have to be ready that when God says follow me, I don't start doing the stuff that I said I don't want my wife to do. If you've got God in your life, He'll tell you those things. It'll quickly happen to you as a man. A man that truly loves the Lord, and you're being receptive and being open, you'll start to realize, before I start talking about them, you'll change the way you talk about them, because you'll realize you ain't no different, right? You ain't no different. And that's why I said, I think one time I was talking to my dad about, or at least he was telling me about Adam and Eve. And he was like, sometimes we look at it from a perspective, Adam and Eve, as being man and woman. But he said, look at it as a perspective as man being the humankind, not the human being, rather than man as in the gender or the sex, but look at it as human being, man and his soul. He said, look at it as man and his soul. Adam being the human being and Eve being the soul. And when the soul decided to go elsewhere, to go and, maneuver and be inquisitive and get excited about things and look at things, at the point that man should have said to my soul, hey, soul, what did God say to us? We shouldn't be there. We should be over here. And because he doesn't say anything, doesn't protect the soul now has a conversation with the snake. The snake says what it says. The soul desires something. And when he yields to his soul, he goes elsewhere. And I was like, wow. At first I said, nah, I can't buy that, because, I have a literal translation. But from a relationship standpoint, I kind of got what he was saying, right? It's not just about men and women, but it's about understanding a different perspective. And I was like, all right, cool. Let me work with that. And what it really opens up our minds to is that, first and foremost, we have to look at the principles of God first to interpret what relationships should look like. And when we look at it from a perspective of pain and unhealed perspectives, we take advantage of the principles to make it fit how we feel or to our advantage. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So without that perspective, okay, without that perspective, we're gonna mess up a lot of our relationships, right? And I'm sure a lot of us can agree here, man and woman, that we've been in spaces where it's like, you know what? We've been in spaces where it's like, oh, um, uh, you know, that person was at fault, and so it's mad. I had a conversation with my ex the other day, and while I was having a conversation with her, I was like, you know what? There's several things I need to apologize for. Several, right? And the apology wasn't to be self-serving and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so great." But the apologies were because once I realized, whoa, I had some bad. You were not the only problem. You were not the only problem. I was a problem too. I had to start looking. I was like, whoa, I was doing X, I did Y, I did Z. I did this for you. Ooh, I was kind of messy. I was kind of toxic. Oh, that I was dysfunctional. I was out of bounds. Okay. And when you start looking at yourself, you start realizing you think they're the only person who's a problem until you start to look at yourself and go, what have I done? What is my contribution in these situations? But I'm going ahead of myself because I'm talking about stuff that I was going to talk about later. Um, you know, you know, I'll get to that, Suta, as well. It's a good point. That's a good point. I'll get to that as well, Suta. So, that's in that aspect, right? Okay. And I think it's also interesting because I talked about how men are women, right? In this situation. Okay. Um, but I'll put it this way now. When women become men, right? When women become men, they also realize just how difficult it is to be a man in this world. When women have to start doing what men do, we suddenly realize how hard it is. When women are doing things like, for instance, becoming, having to provide, for instance, we talk about this, right? When you have no choice, when you're suddenly stuck in a place where you have no choice and you have to perform and everything relies on your performance, how tired do you get? When protection is solely based on you now, and you have to protect your kids or your family, and there's no man. I put there's no man because I want to flip the roles. How difficult is it? Suddenly you realize how many dangers there are. Suddenly you tell your kids, don't go here, and they go there, and you're frustrated because why? Why won't you listen to me? I'm telling you. Well, and you're like, I don't have to tell you and explain it to you all the time what we're going through. You find out how difficult it is. Protection. Then it comes to speaking life into your individuals. But when you're tired and you're having to deal with having to protect and provide as a constant basis for your role, it gets tough, isn't it? In fact, being a mother sometimes can be a thankless job. Sometimes even the kids don't even thank you. You know they know they appreciate you. You know they appreciate you, but it's a thankless job at times. How hard is it? That's exactly what men are going through too. So when men are saying to you, listen, we want to protect you, but when I tell you just don't go here, don't have an argument with me for the next 10 minutes. You know how it feels when you're a mother. It's tiring for men too. When men are saying, listen, I've got to go to work and I have no choice. And I'm talking about good men, because some of these men out here are letting their wives go to work for £3,000 a month rent and out here sleeping with other women. So those men, we discount them. All right. The men are trash out there. You understand? Yeah. But you know how tiring it is when suddenly every performance is around you. That's what men are saying to you too. It is tiring being in a place where there is no escape. You have to play this role. In fact, you are judged on that performance of your provision. Ain't no woman out here screaming, "I want a broke man." Okay, ain't no woman out here screaming, I like me a broke man. Maybe an ugly man, but not a broke one. Right? It's a lot of pressure when you're having to speak life into things, but the person doesn't want to listen, or they don't stand still long enough to hear your words of wisdom. They want to go wherever they want to go to. It can be difficult. Men and women need to understand each other by hearing each other's experiences. Let me tell you something. I was moved to compassion. I was moved to compassion when I heard what kind of struggles women go through in pregnancy. Blood. Let me tell you something. Family, man, them. I need you to be in a room where women are telling you some of the horror stories that happens to them when they go through pregnancy. I almost fainted at one point. This is Clubhouse days in 2020. I remember being in one room and I'm hearing some of these ladies talk about pregnancy, and I almost fainted at one point. I said, woo, people are losing teeth, people are losing hair, people are losing functions of their body, people are losing their sex drives, people are losing a lot of things, people in pregnancy. It is a dangerous thing. Now, if I see it that way and I hear you and I listen and I understand these kind of things and some of the things you're facing, surely I should be moved to compassion. Surely I should be moved to a place where I try to understand you more. Surely I should move to a place where I begin to actually, let's see how best I can help make it easier for you. Right? Right? But the same thing has to be said for women too. When you're being in spaces where you hear what men go through, some women don't even think men have feelings. Some women don't even think men have feelings. They'll do whatever. They don't care. Right? Now, I'm not trying to compare the two. It's not about comparing the two. It's not about what's most harshest or what's more thingy. I'm just talking in general terms. I'll give an example. Some women don't even believe that men have feelings. What's feelings? What is that? Like, you know what I mean? Some women will go to, I don't know why a man complains he has it easier than every woman in this world. But we're talking about having healthy relationships, right? When we hear the other party, we can start to actually begin to be more compassionate, and empathy can reign. When I hear your side of things and hear your perspective, I can have some more empathy, right? This is what's important. This is what's important. Now we can talk about the reason, we can talk about who started it and who. I hear that. But we got enough of those people doing that. Now we're talking about the fact that this is the actual problem. What we need to be doing now is actually listening to one another and hearing one another, so we can actually heal from some of these pains that we're feeling right now. When men become women and women become men, and I'm talking about an understanding, and understanding that we're no different to one another, apart from that there's some other qualities, of course, within ourselves intrinsically. Once we realize we're both human beings, and human beings all need the same thing, then we start to realize that actually I have to start looking at you in a different way. But some of us are trapped in the matrix. And I'm going to speak from a male perspective once again. I believe that men are leaders. I believe that God called men to be leaders. It does not mean that women can't lead. I'm saying that I believe that most men, it's not most, I'm sorry. I believe that men are called to be leaders. Now, not all men, many are called, but few are chosen. Right? Many are called, but few are chosen. And I believe the reason why we'll need more women leaders is because a lot of men don't step up. Right? I still think there are exceptions to the rule. I think God loves a little exception. I'm not gonna lie to you. He loves it. Right? And we see it throughout the Bible. Women that break the trend, that are influential and cannot be erased from the history of the gospel because of what they did. And they did something that other men didn't even bother doing. That tells me that there's a weight, and there's a necessity, and there's a gap for women as well at these spaces and at these tables. And remember, if we're leading by a place of love, it is not to dominate. But I definitely believe our communities are better served with men being leaders in the majority feel. That doesn't mean all, it means that men in the majority feel. Okay. All right. So what's important here now is that if we're talking about, if I'm coming from my perspective is about now, okay, great. I have this knowledge. I need to impart this into other men. And not only impart this into other men, I must take uh on those points too, and make sure, that I'm also contributing in behavior. So let me give an example what I mean by this. Okay. And you will understand where I'm coming from. As I was sweeping my floor today, it made me think this YouTube channel is a marriage. It's a marriage. It is a symbiotic relationship between me and you, right? And and I'm talking about us, I'm talking about myself as representing man, and a majority of my audience being women, right? There's a marriage in it. And I talk about it in that perspective so that I can understand certain themes. What that means is, if I'm telling if I'm telling women how to behave, I also must understand that as me as a man, when I'm dealing with women, I must behave like almost a husband. And listen to what I'm saying. Hear me out. When I'm talking about behaving as a husband, means I should usher out love first. Even if they don't give it to me back, I should usher out love first. Because biblically, it was for the man to show love first and the woman responds. Right? So if I want others to lead in the correct way, I must set the pace, the temperature, and how it's going to look. So this YouTube channel ends up becoming, quote unquote, like a marriage, because I end up behaving like a husband, not necessarily a husband in all totality. We're talking about an idea and a concept. Don't go and lose it and tell your husbands that I'm now your husband, please. Okay, this ain't a cult. Okay, we're just talking in terms of concepts. But now I end up becoming like a husband. Therefore, I have to think, how would I want to issue a decree or change? How would I want people to see not only men, but also themselves as women. Because if I see myself as a husband, what's my role? Protect, provide, and be a priest. Let me start this way. How do I protect you as my audience? Is to make sure, and it came to me the other day when Trey was on the live, and I loved it. It was so beautiful. The other day on the live, we had an open panel, or was it men's panel? And shout out to Bruiser, he's always welcome. But Bruiser came in, okay? Bruiser came in, all right, and said some nonsense in the chat. It was really nonsense. He was speaking about one of the ladies, and it was nonsense. It was just unnecessary, right? And then what happened is Trey actually in the chat was like, "Bro, we're not doing that here. We ain't doing that. That's not what we're doing right now. Like, leave that alone." Right? Instantly. Why? Because the first thing as a husband is that you protect your wife and your children, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, sexually, whatever, financially, you protect them. You make sure. So this space has to be a safe space in order to cultivate the environment that we need for people to be receptive, which means I have to do a job first, create the space, and then I have to police it. And when I say police, I use the word police lightly. I don't want to make it as like, you know what I mean? But it's more in the sense of making sure that we adhere to certain rules in this space so that, right? So that we can all be able to function in that space. So that also people are receptive to what's being said, both men and women. Right? So that both men and women are protected. And so when Trey got involved with Bruiser and said what he said, it was amazing because I was like, yes, we're getting it now. We want to protect. It doesn't mean that men can't speak. It doesn't mean that women can't speak. What it does mean is when we are getting to a space where we're starting to now try and hurt the other person, we don't need that. When we're poking fun at people and not really trying to have a conversation, this ain't the time for that. Shut that down. Right? Shut that down. Do you get what I'm saying? Right? Because immediately as he did, right? Immediately as he did that, right? He starts going on a tangent in the chat, and it's drawing women away from the conversation now to him. And instead of and what he doesn't realize is he circumvented the good work that men had done on the panel. He circumvented it. Right? So what Trey was trying to do to him was let him know, listen, that's not how we operate on this side. And see, when men start talking and start guarding spaces, other men, when they come in, have two things to do. Either you quit and you go away, or you adhere to what the measures of those people are in that community. That's why I said about being almost like a husband in the sense of protection. Then there's a provision aspect. Now, of course, I ain't gonna lie to you, I'm not paying your bills, girls. Okay, all right, I'm not paying your bills here. Okay, all right, on YouTube. All right, that's what we're talking about. But what we are talking about is the emotional and the mental provision here, which is the conversations we're having. How do I feed the people that I'm around? How do I effectively feed them? You see, Jesus did the exact same thing. How do I feed these people? How do I feed them? Right? How do I feed these people? See, I only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So how do I feed these 5,000 people? And somehow Jesus breaks the bread, and I don't know how he broke the fish, because that's still that one. I can understand breaking the bread. I can see crumbs now, but how do you break fish? You know what I mean? I don't know how he broke the fish, but somehow people were eating the fish. But what does that mean? It means a sense of there's a sense of provision by Jesus. And you notice the disciples were actually saying to him, Jesus, we can't feed all these people, so we need to just kind of leave this alone. He's like, no. The people are here, they're hungry, they must be fed. They must be fed. So the content that we put out becomes the feeding of the people. And just like in a marriage, the husband has a role of feeding the woman the right food. Do you know what's interesting? I was interesting because I remember I remember a situation some years ago and I think I told you a story about a certain musician in the Christendom. And he came in and preached some message and then did some madness, right? And I remember there was a girl that I liked or whatever. Actually one of my exes. And I remember at the time I was looking at her and I was like, don't go up. Like, just don't go up, right? Now, of course, I didn't know her that well at the time, but you know, um, it went. She ended up going, right. But what was really interesting was um, during the relationship, I didn't feed her the way I should have fed her, right? Because I wasn't doing that. Because I was like, you have to have your own relationship with God, and you got to make sure that you do that. And I believe that that's true. Everyone should have their own relationship with God. Everyone should have their own time with God as well. But there's a really important process that needs to happen between man and woman, which is the feeding. The feeding, which is that, especially if you're the stronger Christian, because I mean, we'd all want it that way. But the spiritual aspect, if you're more versed in it, you definitely need to feed the other person, especially because there's a lot of knowledge out there. Okay, it's a lot of knowledge out there which ain't of Christ, but there's a need for feeding. How do I feed you correctly? I make sure that I keep it in alignment with what God says, not only about His word, but about what is love. So, for instance, you saw this year, and in fact, if you've been with me the last 2 years, I've had to grow in a particular way. Yeah. Um, it's like I have to grow in a particular way. So, for instance, when we had the conversation about men's feelings and the way they operate, and the women were coming, I was like, yo, women, what are we doing? Da, 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 da. Why are we behaving like this? Right. But then I had to also be understanding that maybe where you're coming from, you might be a little bit triggered. Now, that means the way I respond to you is most important. See, in that moment where you hurt me, what do I do? Because I want to teach you how I want you to treat me when you're hurt. So if in that moment, right, and this is where as a husband, it kind of, you have to make sure you choose the right person, of course, when you get married and stuff like that, right? But learning how do I respond to you in that moment? So if you hurt me, how do I respond to you now? Do I now lose it and go mad? You see me lose it before, guys. Married at First Sight is still there. Zach and Zach and Zach and Michaela is still up there. That video is still up there, and it's still up there because it's a momentum of growth, but it also is a reality of life. I don't always get it right. The Kayla situation where I messed up with Ready to Love and I did what I did. The video's still up there. I've not taken it off because it's a reality of life. Things don't go away just because you raised it from your particular memory. It doesn't go away. So now in those moments, how do I respond to you? Because I'm ready to I'm ready to go out. You ready? I'm ready to go. But in that moment, how do I get to cultivate a behavior if that's not how you want me to behave? How do I cultivate that? You don't want me to shout at you, but you're shouting at me. Hmm? I want you to listen, but I won't listen to you. Right? Okay. So now what you're wanting from me and what I'm wanting from you, I have to exhibit it so that you can also follow it. And vice versa as well. As a woman, too, what you want from me, you have to exhibit it so I get it. But again, both men and women don't always want the same things. Right? And we can talk about that in a second as well, too. But this is how we start to heal, when we start to realize, hey, that's not how we do things here. This is not the culture we're building. We're not building a culture where we're fighting each other and trying to kill each other. No, we're building a culture where we try to bring understanding. So that means also too, when I speak to the men, when I say, look, we're going to do a men's panel, I don't want it to be a bashing session. I don't want it to be um I don't want it to be a hot take of being angry at women and trying to get one up on them. No, rather, bro, like I want to be in a space where, okay, if we're going to talk about that, how are we going to make sure that we are the exemplary example? Because I'm not waiting for women to do this. I have to lead it. Because I'm asking them to change, but they're not doing it myself. I have to lead it. One of the most annoying things He used to have when we were younger. We used to have arguments with our dad, or not even arguing, but get onto him. He hated shoes being left in the living room. That guy, if he sees your shoes in the living room, oh my days, he gonna fight you. When he comes back from work, if you've left your shoes, you scatter. It's not, you don't leave your shoes in the living room when dad's coming round, right? And the few times that he left it, oh, we reminded him. It was a few times because it wasn't many. I'll be honest with you, but a few times he did it, we reminded him. Huh? This we reminded him. Say, hey, you'll be shouting at us, telling us, right? But I also realized while he led exemplary in the shoes, the reason why we got onto him was not because of his shoes being in there. It's because of the way he did it. Every time he did it, we'd be shouting about it rather than saying, "Hey, you've left your shoes. Can you just come and take it away?" Or even sometimes just taking our shoes for us. Say, "Hey, you left your shoes, but I've taken it for you. It's okay." What would have happened is we would have responded the exact same way. And when his shoes were left there, I'd have never said anything. I'd have taken his shoes and taken them to the room. But because he often did it when he was frustrated, or when he said it, he was frustrated and angry, what happens? We're just giving him back what he gave us. So in his head, he's doing the right thing because, again, he's a parent. He's telling you what to do. He's disciplining you. I'm not mad at it. What I'm saying is I'm now looking at it from another objective perspective to go, oh, okay. Do you know what? One step further that I have to go, because I saw how it affected, is that it's not about being angry in that moment, right? It's not about being angry in that moment. It's not about being frustrated in that moment. It's about what I'm trying to show you. So if your shoes left in the living room, I'm like, hey, your shoes left in the living room, but I'm going to take it for you today. You know what I mean? I'm going to take it for you, right? And what will happen is when I do that, when I cover you, you going to end up what? Covering me, right? So I have to show you, and I say this because that's what I see God do. You know what I'm saying? So this is why somebody who has a principle of love first is important. Having Christ as your head is important because you learn the lessons from him first, and you start to realize how gracious he has been. This is as gracious I need to be with my partner, right? So when he was shouting, saying your shoes are left in the living room, guess what happens? We will be like, your shoes are left in the living room. I thought you told us not to leave our shoes in the living room. Now we're giving him attitude. He thinks we're being, but the thing is, we've learned that, we've been conditioned to that. If he had just come in and said, listen, your shoes, guys, I don't want to get angry, but your shoes are in the living room. Please just take them. Is that okay? Thank you. Boom. Would have taken it. And what would have happened is when he left his shoes, we'll come and take his shoes. You know? But it's all about this. So yes, the channel is a marriage in the sense of where I'm supposed to, and you're supposed to come to this place of learning. There's times where you're going to frustrate me. There's times I'm going to frustrate you. There's times we're going to disagree. But how do we disagree with one another? There's going to be times where I say something and you just it might not work with you. There's been times that you ladies are going to say something and it just might not work with me. And we may have to come back later on and be like, hey, that's the full reason of why I didn't fully understand it at the time, but I understood it. Why I did the apology videos. One, for myself, but two, to exhibit a different behavior. Because if I get something wrong and I was so solid about it in the beginning, that I was so prideful about it, I'm going to have to apologize because it's the way I did it in the first place. You know what I mean? When a parent's so strict, it is what it is. And then they find out that the parent was actually wrong. What's your next step? What's your next step? As a husband, if you were completely wrong and you completely dismiss what the other person said and said, this is it, this is what it is, what would we have to do in that moment? I'm probably going to have to apologize. And it's okay. Why is it a big deal for you to apologize? Why are you struggling to apologize? And this is for both men and women. Why is it a struggle for you to apologize? This queen quit said, why are your shoes in the living room? So this is about, again, helping us to mend those fences and mend those bridges with each other as well, right? So in those moments where you're having to, quote unquote, release the pride, apologize so that people can actually move forward, it's not about your pride in that moment. It's meant to be about the fact that I want to keep the relationship healthy. I want to grow in those instances, right? Coming out of those spheres where they put the blame on the other person solely, rather than looking at collectively, how do we actually mend these wounds that we're feeling? will always leave us in a place where we miss the mark. Let me get this point across as well. Um, as well. I think my last point. I've gone to an hour. I don't want to go more than an hour. I really don't want to go more than an hour, to be honest. We can go another day and we can talk about it. This was an impromptu live I was doing. So, okay. So I think as well, I think the final point I want to end on today. Maybe we can carry on this message another day. You know what I mean? Time. I think what's really key is that there is poor accountability on both sides, especially when it comes to relationships. There's definitely poor accountability on both sides when it comes to relationships, and this is what's really needed. A failure to be able to review and analyze a situation, but putting the blame solely on somebody else when it comes to relationships is a problem because it always leaves you in victim mode. I've been on the Peef Network about 3 or 4 times now, right? Or 2 or 3 times, so I should say, more closer to accuracy. With Mark Trigger show, which is really cool, like on a Friday or a Wednesday usually, right? A Mark Trigger show. And hearing the points of some of the men and then hearing some of the women too, I'm like, eesh. I was wrestling with one guy and I was telling him about, he's telling me about, so many women now are promiscuous and are 304s. And I said, okay, so what? What does that mean? Why are you fishing in the trash for a wife? Where's your accountability? Right? Where's your accountability? Why are you fishing in the trash for 304s and women that are promiscuous? Why are you looking for the women that are do necessary things that you don't like? AW, ho. 304 means ho. Okay. Or loose one, or just, yeah, plastic, if you want to call it that way, right? Why are you shopping for that type of woman? All right. That's the question I have to ask. That's where you have to be accountable. You pointing out saying that women more today are more promiscuous. That's why we don't do marriage, don't do relationship. I'm like, no. Why are you shopping for those type of women? And then let's go to the women. Yeah. These men are trash. These men are bad. These men, these men don't provide. Darling, has he ever shown you that he can provide? Have you actually looked back through the relationship and actually assessed where the red flags are? Have you looked at some of the characteristics that you're actually saying you need and want? And are they actually on the list that they actually need to be on a proper list? Is he always the villain in the story? That's a question I'm asking. Accountability. Right? Now, of course, there are some stories, yes, we know. He never showed me that. He never did that. We're not, there are exceptions to the rule. But a lot of times, these men show their ass early. Yeah? Early. A lot of times, these men show their ass early. And what happens is we've not been trained to look for these effective red flags. Right? And sometimes you are a red flag. You yourself are the red flag because you can't spot the other red flags because you are the red flag. Wounds and brokenness makes you have a distorted view. And this is why we're going back to our original point at the very beginning when we started this live, was to talk about healing on both men and women, black men and women. Because if men are complaining about women are trash and they don't do this now, and I'm asking you, what are you looking for in a woman? Why do you keep entertaining these women? And the men too, and the women too. Why do you keep entertaining some of these men? Why is it that you keep doing? And here's the biggest thing. It goes back to my original point where I said information overload. A lot of these stories we hear, they come outside of our circle. A lot of the confirmations, anyway, let me say that. But once you begin to be healthy, you begin to avoid a lot of situations. It's very difficult, but you're actually right, Z. It's very difficult. But the reality is, when people get healed, both men and women, by the way, when they get healed, they start avoiding some of these situations. The problem is, some of people are going to the graveyard for these men and women because you dead too. You are operating in the graveyard because you are dead too. And instead of being alive by healing yourself to see things correctly and see as the living do, you see, because that's what the Bible is telling us. The message of the Christ on the cross is telling us that since Christ died, he resurrected and we have resurrected with him. I am now alive. I am now fully alive. So that's why I see things differently. When you get the healing, you now come alive and you see things differently. But when you're dead, you operate as the dead do. You go where they go. You behave as they behave. You move as they move. So to become alive, one needs to have this knowledge and understanding, but also as well get the healing. Whether that's a therapist, whether that's a counselor, get someone to start listening to you. You know, a lot of you guys healing, men and women, by the way, a lot of you guys healing is actually you just talking. Some of you are carrying some burdens on your neck and your head. Some of you are carrying some burdens. Literally, a lot of your healing will come from just telling your story. Some of you have never told your story. You told bits of your story to several different people, but you've never had an opportunity to say your story. And so it's sitting on your neck and it's sitting on your shoulders. It's sitting on your head. And there's a lot of pressure. And you know what happens when we're in pain? We tend to react. So there's a need for healing. Right? There's a need for healing. So sometimes it can be very difficult to see better because you need the healing to be able to do so. So I'm encouraging anybody here, if you know you're struggling in relationships, if you keep meeting the same old bad girls and the same old bad guys, I need you to take accountability. I need you to take accountability. If you keep meeting bad guys and bad women, right, it's time to get some healing. They're not the problem anymore. You are. That's a harsh word, as a father would say to a child, like, you're the problem. No, but what I'm saying is that if you keep meeting the same old one, there's no good guys, you're the problem. Because there are good guys. And if you keep meeting bad women, let me tell you something, you're the problem. And if that means you may have to sit out for a little while until you can begin to spot some of these goons and these women, go and sit down. Right? If that means you go and sit out of the game for a little while so you can see better, okay, then go and sit down. Because that's what we need. Go and sit down. Right? Go and sit down. Because until you begin to heal, you won't even realize what you're contributing. Do you know, my last point is this. Sometimes when I talk to people, I say, and I think you've heard me say this before, sometimes you think the person is triggering you. And I said to you, you don't realize that you may be triggering them and they're getting triggered by you and they're triggering you and you're triggering them again. Sometimes you guys are trapped in a vicious cycle. You say, they're the one that are bad. But you don't realize even your behavior is triggering them in a way to be triggered by you. And you're triggering, so it can be actually a triggering cycle. Sometimes you need to leave situations alone. Come back when you're more mature and when you're more healed, so that you can actually begin, okay, so you can actually begin to see the situation in a different way. That's true, Jay. Ashley and Winter, yeah. You know, that's very true. Z can't tell a story, don't even understand the time, which is why counselors and therapists are there. This is why it is. You know, this is why we need counselors and therapists, because they're the ones that usually ask the right question to be able to extract that information from you. Right? I'm telling you, man. um this queen said, by the time you heal up, they're telling you you're in a danger zone. And do you know what the funny thing is? Even that situation, right? Look, most of us are getting married later and later and later in life. So that 30 wall they're talking about, it's not even that. It's not. It's objectively, if you look at it from a different situation, most of us are getting married later. And look, by the time you realize, the people that even who have started relationships ahead of you have not finished. They've even quit early. You understand? Don't be in a rush to get into a relationship. Don't be in a relationship. Don't be in a rush to get into marriage. Like, and I'm not saying get married later. What I'm saying is a sense of, let's make sure we do some work. Let's have some self-reflection. You know, let's make sure we're holding a mirror up to ourselves, so we make sure if we keep meeting bad gal or keep meeting bad guy, we've got to start looking at ourselves and say, what am I contributing here? Why do I see them? And why do I entertain them? You know, but it's healing that's needed on both sides. So we need to have more space for conversations. And by the way, I'm not the only channel who's doing this great kind of work. I think I love listening to Cruise Season. I don't know, I haven't listened to them recently, but Cruise Season do some really good conversations as well. I tune in a little bit here and there, you know, as well. Um, you know, so yeah, yeah, man. So I'm gonna leave it there. I didn't even do all my notes, to be honest, but I wanted to stay to the time. You know what I mean? This ain't black church where, time runs over, but like, the Lord is speaking. No, there's time. Okay, the Lord ain't speaking. It's time. All right, it's time. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you for staying with us as well. Hopefully this helps somebody as well. We'll be back later on. We've got a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air live to do later on today. Then we've got men's panel as well. There is a live tonight, AW. Yes, there is. There's a men's panel and Bel-Air live as well. So we'll have that a little bit later for you. I think the men's panel is usually at 8 p.m. if I'm correct, 8 p.m. And then I think the Bel-Air, we'll do Bel-Air at 7 p.m. EST. Yeah, EST. So I'll put up the I need to put up the thing on my YouTube so you guys get notification. All right. So we can talk about it. Elsid asks what the men's panel is. I haven't decided yet because there's been a few topics coming on my mind, and I haven't fully decided as of yet. So I'll keep you guys posted, but I haven't decided as of yet. But we'll get you a good topic, okay? All right. So, and I really want to start talking to the young men as well. So I really want to start doing topics for young boys, because I think we need a space where we can talk to these young boys, so we can begin the healing as well for them. So there's a space where they can learn about becoming a man and coming into adulthood. So I've been talking to the boys behind the scenes to try and get us having conversation about real things that are affecting the youth. And I'm trying to stay away from topics that are really just there to be divisive, rather than just being actual things that are going to heal the community. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, honestly, guys, on your way out, like the live, share, subscribe as well. We appreciate you guys as well. If someone needs this, send this to them. You understand? We appreciate you guys. Stay locked. So we'll see you again very, very soon.